I want to show you a documentary, and when you watch this, I pray that the Lord will bring up the thoughts within you, and you see the need for prayer and how these things must be corrected. Watch this.
What happened to your boys?
We lost them. We lost our boys, and we were given 2 boys, the same outward body, but inside different. And that was after we had them vaccinated.
They're frozen in time. Those shots froze them in time.
Our middle child, Billy, went in for his routine MMR shot and was catastrophically damaged as a result of that within 24 hours, and then regressed into this condition they call autism.
Nate Wepner is 9 years old. He still wears diapers, does not sleep well, cannot have a conversation, and can barely sit still for his therapist this day.
This is where he's put his head through the wall, head through the wall. Ow, 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 ow,
ow. This is the result of my autistic son, Andrew, who went into a rage.
Unfortunately for Pam and her husband Brian, rages are common for their 2 adult children with autism.
She's a 17-year-old, lovely girl with
severe autism.
And
in and out, no 5 guys. Great. We're not. It is dark out. Great. You need to calm down. No.
Sorry. Vaccine injury is real. And then we were told we could not sue anyone. We were told we signed for that shot. No doctors could be sued. No vaccine manufacturers could be sued.
You hear this story over and over again. The child runs a high fever hours after vaccination, screaming, sleep regression. At a certain point, their body basically just collapses. Sometimes they sleep, sometimes they don't.
From tetanus and measles vaccines to the COVID vaccines, what do multiple studies reveal about the health of the vaccinated versus the health of the unvaccinated? And as the childhood vax schedule expands, are we seeing healthier or sicker children?
And shows an increased incidence in autism. This has to drastically stop because we are sacrificing our children with every needle stick.
Autism spectrum is an umbrella term used to describe a range of conditions characterized by difficulties in social interactions and communication, unusual sensitivity to sensory inputs, and restricting repetitive behaviors. The word spectrum means there is a great array of symptoms with various degrees of severity. With autism, there can be a wide range of intellectual and learning abilities from highly capable to severely challenged. A number of other conditions tend to occur more often in autistic people, including gastrointestinal disorders, epilepsy, feeding problems, anxiety, and depression. Widespread differences in an autistic brain. Notably, there are alterations in neuronal connectivity. Some connections are enhanced, while others are reduced. Overall, though, an autistic brain seems to have more connections than usual. As a result, autistic people may notice details that others do not, but have difficulty following the topic of a conversation or seeing other people's point of view. In trying to reduce sensory input, people with autism typically withdraw from others and follow a strict daily routine. Depending on the affected sensory modalities, some people avoid eye contact, others cover their ears to reduce noise level, wear loose clothing to reduce touch, or eat the exact same foods day after day. Signs of autism usually manifest early in life, and diagnosis can often be made by age 2 or 3.
Look at what's happening to children who have become autistic. Just like you heard, where a very active child suddenly becomes asinine, or even a well-behaved child becomes radically active, overactive. Something just goes wrong, unstable. Parents are going through terrible times because of what has happened to their children. And most don't realize it happened by vaccinations.
She had over 9 inoculations that day. And that was the day that we lost her. After that shot, he was a completely different boy.
When she woke up, she was a different child.
He didn't say words anymore. He did not know his name anymore. I would ask him, how old are you? And he didn't know anymore. After almost 3.5 weeks of a fever, a runny nose, cough, hard trouble breathing, we noticed she wasn't talking. She started to get frustrated and seemed confused. And then there would be zombie-like moments where she would just stare out the window and you could yell her name as loud as you can and she wasn't even going to respond.
Through the next 6 months, he had to wear a helmet because he would hurt himself. He would bang his head against walls. He liked to play in his diaper. He was definitely not speaking. He wasn't crawling. He wasn't walking. It was very clear that there was brain damage involved.
What alarmed me the most was the reaction the doctor had. It was an immediate defense of vaccines.
His reaction was, well, that's what happens when you get a lot of shots.
And just by looking up the definition of autism, I knew he had it because everything that was being described, it was what he was doing. So after that, I took him into an evaluation and he got the actual diagnosis. I mean, they can call it autism, but it was a clear indication of when it started, how it happened.
As a young mom, I thought I knew everything. I researched the crib, I researched the car seat, I made sure we were in the best school district, and I mean hours and hours of research. But when it came time to vaccinations, I completely trusted my doctor.
Those of you who have kids, little children, and you are rushing to get them vaccinated after birth, you are destroying those children. You are giving them sicknesses they were never born with. Now they have the potential to be sick with what you thought you were preventing them from.
Millions of children around the world have fallen victim to the horrendously damaging consequences of the sinister works of these pharmaceutical industries. Truckloads of evidence have proven that most vaccines are dangerous to human beings. Let's take a closer look at some of the content of these vaccines.
Show them the thimerosal bomb, which we keep in a metal container because we're a little afraid of it, and it's a very fine powder.
This is thimerosal, which is labeled very toxic. Has cumulative effects, can cause damage to the kidneys, to the respiratory system, skin, to the nervous system. It specifically warns on here that it can cause reproductive and developmental toxicity, meaning that it can cause things like autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. This is immensely toxic stuff. And this is what's in the vaccine. It's important to realize we're talking about a whole range of products. Vaccines are a big one because, of course, you're directly injecting it. For example, this is tetanus vaccine. This one expires, it's a little outdated now, in 2007. Here's the thimerosal. 1 to 10,000 is a preservative. Perhaps the biggest one in the US, at least, that's for exposure to mercury is the influenza vaccine. Influenza vaccine is now recommended for all pregnant women, all infants, all children on a yearly basis. You're supposed to have last year's influenza.
Understand that thimerosal is not added at the end. It's not like, well, that factory next year can make thimerosal free. Thimerosal, you either have to have a thimerosal free factory or you have to not have one. They add thimerosal at each step because the factory is not clean and not sterile. So you either have to have an expensive sterile factory where you don't need thimerosal, or you have to have one that produces thimerosal. It's going to need thimerosal or something the whole time. It needs to be stopped.
This is the influenza vaccine from Adventist Pasteur, their flu zone. Thimerosal, 25 micrograms of mercury per dose.
But I'd like to point out that a lot of people didn't know, and I'm one of them. I've given 2,000 RhoGAM shots. I've been in vaccines for 35 years. I didn't know that RhoGAM had thimerosal in it, so I think a lot of the doctors were unaware. They were unaware that even the word thimerosal meant mercury.
Mr. Pastor Chris, are there no good vaccines? No good vaccines. All vaccines are bad. 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 I told you. From the very history of vaccines. I explained to you. They lied to you in school as they lied to us in school.
My mission actually for the last 23 years has been to inform people about the problems associated with vaccines, that they're not safe, they don't keep you from getting sick, they're not necessary, and they absolutely cause harm, and I'm talking about all of them, the entire pediatric schedule and, of course, the COVID jabs. I really thought that the only thing in a vaccine was a little dead or attenuated virus and a little bit of normal saline. It wasn't until September of 2000 that I actually read a package insert, and when I actually read a package insert and started researching all the different vaccines, I was mortified that if a child gets all of the vaccines in the entire schedule, they get almost 13,000 micrograms of aluminum and they get almost 600 micrograms of mercury, plus over 200 different chemicals. And I had no idea. So that's why they've never been proven to be safe, and why giving your child a vaccination is like injecting foreign matter into a little baby that's the most precious little thing in your life.
Satan is more vicious today than he ever was because his time is short, and it's pushing them to get you vaccinated and get your babies vaccinated. And I'm telling you, the rate of increase of autism and several other kinds of diseases is very high now.
What was the autism rate in 1960? Do we know?
In 1960, the autism rate, there's about 4 or 5 studies, and the highest rate, say about 1 in 2,500, 1 in 1,500, 1 in 2,500, 1 in 10,000. So that, it was somewhere between 1 in 1,500 and 1 in 10,000. Today, it's 1 in every 34 kids, according to CDC, and in some states, like California, I think maybe Utah and New Jersey, 1 in 22. 1 in 22 kids. And, these kids should be healthy. These kids should be our highest performing kids. And they instead are have this extraordinary disability that's going to keep them dependent and not, a lot of these, if you're full-blown autism, it's a nonverbal, non-toilet trained, head banging, stimming, toe walking. These are kids that will never throw a baseball. They'll never graduate high school. They'll never go out and take a girl on a date. They'll never use the toilet alone. They'll never write a play. They'll never write a poem. They'll never vote.
What we've learned is this childhood vaccine schedule is not what we thought. And now, critically looking at it, we have a situation that we just learned that the World Council for Health, now international body, is calling for a complete moratorium on childhood vaccines. First international organization to call for that. Why? Because the vaccines are piling up one after another. They're being given in multiple salvos. There are safety events now that we learned. In 1986, the U.S. passed legislation that indemnified the manufacturers of vaccines. In that legislation, it says the vaccines have unavoidable harm. It says that. So what are the harms that we're seeing? It's clear when the vaccines are given in multiple rounds. It's probably no single vaccine and no single additive, but it's the sum total of the vaccines given at once. We're seeing a strong signal towards neuropsychiatric disorders, so attention deficit disorder, Asperger's, autism, seizures, allergic diseases, asthma, atopic dermatitis.
And even death.
Need for termination, sudden infant death syndrome. And then the converse now. This is the converse, which is papers by Mawson, Hooker, Miller, Thomas, and an older Amish study. All 5 studies show if children go natural, no vaccines whatsoever, they have the best outcomes. Wow. Freedom from these things. And, when I was a kid, the rate of autism was 1 in 10,000. Right. Now it's 1 in 36.
Oh, my God.
And there's about 200 published manuscripts showing it's a immune system dysregulation.
1 in 36?
1 in 36.
Yeah.
1 in 36. The immune system dysregulation that, in a reactogenic phase of the vaccine, sometimes with a febrile seizure, the inflammatory factors go into the brain, probably permanently change it. And the vignettes the mothers tell us that the child was fine up until the time they took multiple rounds of vaccines, and then they developed autism. Those vignettes are almost certainly correct. We can't pin it down to any single vaccine, but I'm telling you, in total, it doesn't look good. This epidemic of autism is a tsunami.
And remember, now you say Why autism? I'll tell you, it's very simple. The reason for afflicting these children with autism is part of the depopulation agenda, because one day, as they have planned, all such kids will be rounded up to be destroyed as not good for human communities, and they must not be allowed to reproduce. Listen, what I just told you is nothing new. They did it before. During the Holocaust. That's what they did. That's what they did. They packed all those they called imbeciles and all these good-for-nothing people, they call them. And so if they can afflict and inflict so many with this autism, then all those children will be called no good. And they will convince you that they can't be helped and they must be destroyed.
It comes to the point where to not speak out is to sacrifice a generation of children. We can't risk it. That might be close to the end of the human race, which, by the way, is one of the hidden agendas of some of those at the World Economic Forum, the Bill Gateses, the Klaus Schwabs. They've had this hidden agenda that they've spoken openly about kind of going back to the eugenics program. There's too many people on the planet.
When are you going to know that there is a deception going on? The Bible already showed you, and it told you that nations were deceived by pharmacology.
The CDC finally listed 20 studies that they rely upon, they say, to claim that vaccines don't cause autism for the vaccines given in the first 6 months of life. I can only assume they think we don't read or something, but we do. So we read the 20 studies. Here's the thing about them. 18 of them involve the Marisol, an ingredient not in any of the vaccines we asked about, or the MMR vaccine not given until at least 1 year of life. One of them involved antigen, one of the studies, not vaccine exposure, and that study even says it cannot tell you whether vaccines don't cause autism because it didn't study them. The only review or study they provided us that actually involved a single one of the vaccines given in the first 6 months of life was a study by the Institute of Medicine that found we don't have a single study of whether DTaP does or doesn't cause autism.
Watch the godmother of vaccines. Vaccinologist Dr. Catherine Edwards wilt before your eyes during a deposition in preparation for a vaccine injury trial.
According to your profile, you have done most of the pivotal trials relied upon to license many of the vaccines, correct, on the market?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're highly experienced at conducting clinical trials, correct?
I'm highly experienced conducting clinical trials.
Okay. And you're familiar with many of the clinical trials that relied upon to license many of the vaccines currently on the market, correct?
I am.
Okay. In your opinion, did the clinical trials relied upon to license the vaccines that Gates received, many of which are still on the market today, were they designed to rule out that the vaccine causes autism?
No.
I told you, wherever the vaccines went, diseases sprang up that were never in those environmental communities.
Vietnam doesn't have anything. There's no such thing as autism in 1975, year 2000, year 2001. There's no such thing. When Vietnam signed the WHO, and when Vietnam signed into the International Monetary Fund, the banking system, Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation introduced the vaccination program into Vietnam. Now Vietnam has over a 300% rise in autism.
And if you want to know the problems surrounding vaccines, find out who is about to benefit. That's how you know if something is in the right direction or not. Who's doing it for who and why the insistence?
There is nothing more profitable in our society today than a sick child, because all of these entities are making money on them. The insurance companies, the hospitals, the medical cartel, the pharmaceutical companies have lifetime annuities. I mean, any child and the earlier that kid is sick, they don't want to kill him. They want them sick for the rest of their lives. And we have now a whole generation. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today it's 60%. When my uncle was president, do you know what the cost, the annual cost of treating chronic disease was in this country? 0. There weren't even any drugs invented for it. 0. Today it's about $4.3 trillion.
Many just believe, they were made to believe that they needed vaccines to protect themselves and their children.
We assume that if we vaccinate, we're getting protection. We assume that if we vaccinate, we're stopping spread of disease. Those are assumptions that have never been solidified in science. I have been seeing families in my practice for over 20 years that have opted out of vaccination. They are the healthiest children I have ever seen.
God's people must not give them a chance. That's why we pray. And we have been very effective in our prayer, and we'll continue to pray. Don't give them a chance.
That no advantage may be gained over us by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his devices.
Well, it just shows you the wickedness in the hearts of the eugenicists. They don't care. I want us to pray. You know, there are many government leaders who are deceived and championing for vaccines. Health ministries in different countries where the Minister of Health is actually a stooge of either the Bill Gates Foundation or similar organizations. And we have to condemn these organizations and their ilk. It's time to stop them. Did you notice that doctor? He had never read it. He had never read the document. And he had helped to vaccinate babies, but never read what was in there. Finally, he gets to read it, and he's amazed. And by then, he's already done like 2,000. So many doctors just don't know. They're ignorant. They're following the instructions, the guidance given to them by the Ministry of Health, who was placed there to do that very thing. And he doesn't even know what he's doing. But the Gates Foundation lobbied for him. I don't have a problem with Gates Foundation, but the fact that the foundation is linked and continually involved with all things vaccines. So that's why I'm calling them. And they have to be called on the carpet because it's their job. It's their sponsorship. But it has to stop. It has to stop. They can't be profiting, and why they're calling it a philanthropy. It's no philanthropy, it's death. And I want us to pray. And these evil organizations must leave Africa and Asia. They have to leave Africa and Asia. They've done more than enough harm. It's time for them to go. It's time for them to face justice. And now we're going to pray. We don't have any more children for sacrifice to vaccines. And I've said the program, the vaccination program that they want to do in some schools in different countries must be stopped. Must be stopped. If this doesn't make you angry enough, I don't know what else will. Has to be stopped. I told you before, it's all vaccines. There's been never a good vaccine because it's based on the false theory that you can cure a sickness with the sickness. By giving the person the sickness, you cure the sickness. You make him immune to it by giving it to him. And the world fell for that foolishness. Well, it's time to say no. No more. And any minister of health that insists that vaccination programs should continue in their country is not fit to be in their office. It's just a stooge and should be removed. Let's pray now.